So it's Erev Shua, so we're talking a little bit about the idea of Kabbalah Satayra, but also this phenomenon now that we're seeing in our communities, people who are, I don't think, gifted or more refined, more knowledgeable, have been accepted by their students and others as rebbes of sort. Let's say in Eretz Yisrael you have Rabbi Elimelech Biderman. Now, obviously, he's a very big Oved Hashem. I mean, I'm just telling you what it seems and what I hear and what I read, right? But there's a big difference, and he'll tell you that because he doesn't consider himself a Rebbe, even though people I think do, many do. There's a big difference between a Rebbe and a mashpia or a manig, etc. As we've said in this class for the last 10 years or so, that a Rebbe is a soul geologist. And when you come to a Rebbe, I mean, again, I'm espousing the Chabad belief, but I believe that this is an akudah of the Baal Shem Tov. We believe and understand that the Baal Shem Tov and his Talmidim and the Talmidim who are Rebbes, when they see you, when you speak to them, they're seeing not only your outer, but your inner, your neshama, a soul geologist. These leaders, up and coming, a new kind of Rosh Hashiva and Manhigim who are doing, in a way, so much, really. I'm not convinced yet they're Rebbes, that they have maybe hundreds of thousands of students and do so much for Klal Yisrael, 100%. So one of these fellas, Hillel, this is why I was saying this, learns by this Rav in Borough Park, who's become such an individual. I forget his name, it escapes me now. And he asks me, do you know about Hillel Seitlin's...
Did you say his name or you didn't remember?
I don't remember his name. I don't remember. Maybe it'll come to me. He's very popular.
Okay.
Very popular. He's online, on
English speaking?
Yeah, for sure.
Primarily?
Yeah. He has a beard going down to his belly button on the thinner side. He has a yeshiva. And I know people who are, balabatim, not bocharim, not students who learned in his yeshiva, who identify with him. He and others like him have gone away kind of from the traditional Rebbe Chassid model. The Rebbe Chassid model is it's a rigid one. It's a rigid one. If you think about it, it's rigid, because if you want to be a chassid of this Rebbe and this Hasidic group, these are rules and regulations. The funny thing is that these newcomers, new-founded manhigim and leaders, are rigid also in different ways. But anyway, it's a discussion for another time. And it's still a developing story, because it's too young in the history of the newfound leaders to really understand and talk about intelligently. I'm convinced there'll be a study on this, an academic PhD study. I'm sure there'll be one and more than one if there aren't any yet. So one of these Talmidim who I know is a gifted boy, he's a pianist, he's gifted. And he's a chazan, and if he were to pursue that, he could be a major world's chazan. But he went into this yeshiva, and it seems to me they're like directing him to kind of not go that direction, because it's sneas, how could you perform as a single bacher? It's like you have to be modest. So and he's 18, so I understand. Anyway, so he asks me, he asks me because he loves discussing history with me, So he says, do you know about someone named Hillel Zeitlin? I said, yes, I do. He's one of my students, but you probably mean Hillel Zeitlin of Poland, of Warsaw, from the early 1900s, late 1800s into the 1900s. So when I see your name online here, Hillel Zeitlin, you were part of a big discussion yesterday. He was
a blast from the past,
yeah,
from the distant past.
Yeah, a very interesting and unique individual, someone who grew up in the Chabad system of sorts in the 1800s in a Hasidic home and all that. Then he becomes a maskil, enlightened, and he leaves Frumkeit, orthodoxy, observance on some level. I can't tell you what level. It doesn't mean that he went and, ate on Yom Kippur. I'm not saying that. But for whoever he was, he had a temporary yerida. Or as they say in the Litvische, Misnagdische world, a rifyon. A rifyon. He became weak. I'm weak, I'm fainting, let me sit down. It's like, sorry, please forgive me. That's my ingrained Lubavitch cynicism. I ask for forgiveness for all my listeners. Yes, Moshe.
I've heard in the Litvish world, they call it here in Eretz Yisrael, person had like a mashber.
A mashber really means a nervous breakdown, no? Yeah. But it's not necessarily a mashber, but from their perspective, it's a mashber. A person who chooses, he doesn't want to be religious anymore for whatever reason, he had a mashber. But okay, be that as it may. Anyway, so Hillel Zeitlin goes through this stage, and you're talking here about a master, a genius, a gifted person. You're not talking about, this is an ordinary, this is a special human being in mind and heart and in character, on earth. I mean, that's from what I understand. And then he goes through this phase, and then he becomes a Baal Teshuvah. And the pictures you see of him is his beard is all the way down. He's like, holy, holy, holy. He looks like the Alter Rebbe's chassid of 200 years ago. And then you look at his writings. I don't know if you've seen some of his writings. They're brilliant.
Yeah, I have a number of his farm and writings from.
They're brilliant, and not only they're brilliant, but his writing of classical Chabad is so different, yet so it's tremendous. When the first time that I saw it, I said, "Wow, this is gold." Another writer who captured Chabad with a pen of gold was Eliezer Steinman. He wrote a 5-6 volume series. It's in Hebrew. I forget what it's called. Or Chasidus. Tremendous work. Tremendous. I've used this for my research and writing because they're not coming
I've
from.
never heard it. That's a name I have not heard.
Yeah, look
Any of the other guys heard that name?
You look him up online. Eliezer Steinman.
Okay.
And he was around in the 50s and the 60s and maybe even the 70s. The Rebbe corresponded with him, and the Rebbe told Reb Chanoich Glitzenstein of Yerushalayim, who was the one who wrote Sefer HaToldos of Chabad, and he told him to open up the treasures for Steinman. Because, the inner circle doesn't want to open up, the secrets, we're not talking about any, but still, he's an outsider. Like, you're going to open it up to an academic that's not religious and doesn't really have the kishkis of Chabad, and you're opening up these sensitive letters, all kinds of periods. The Rebbe said, yeah. Again, you see the Rebbe's vision. And he was right on, because Steinman took it and wrote such a work. And because he's not coming from the Chabad kind of culture in the yeshiva, it's fascinating. It's fascinating to be able to express some of the same ideas in in a independent way with a new language. Rabbi Steinsaltz did some of that too, you should know. Adin Steinsaltz is not a traditionalist. He's very much not a traditionalist, and that's why B'nai Brak and Company had a big problem with it, to the point of burning his books. Because Steinsaltz was not, and I know this from him, talking in 770 to Hasidim, and he is scolding them, and Reb Mendel Futterfass is on one side, all these big Hasidim are there, and he's blasting them how, this is called work, this is called doing for the Rebbe. Like, you should be working 24/7, which Steinsaltz did. He was working around the clock. He slept and ate, but point is that, so Steinsaltz was a very much independent. Even his explanation on Tanya, if you compare his to some of the traditional Chabad books on Tanya, it's very different. I'm not even talking about the psychological part, which he uses lots of in his Tanya, Bi'urei Tanya, but even in Pshat, it's Atzma'i. So we find that, Hillel Zeitlin, during his time, was such a person. He was a Zionist, a strong Zionist, and he wrote about it in in the Sfarim. Really was a Zionist.
Yeah.
His belief in Mashiach, tremendous. And here's a person coming from Chabad lineage, real Chabad lineage, going through Haskalah and everything that the 1880s and on brought to the Jewish world, leaving kind of the tradition to some degree, and then making a full U-turn and becoming about Teshuvah. I don't want to say this, but halavai, all about Teshuvahs, we should all be this way, that whatever we go through and we come back to, we should make this full circle that we're, at the end of our life, we're really plugged in. And Nebuchadnezzar was murdered in the Warsaw Ghetto, I believe, in 1942. That's just a little bit.
Yeah, there's a powerful story in the book, The Unconquerable Spirit, about how Hillel Zeitlin, when he was called to the gathering place for the trains to Auschwitz, that he apparently stood up and made a speech. And he spoke there, and he said, "Jews, our death is now assured. The only thing that remains to be determined is the manner of our death." Apparently, he started a riot there, a resistance there. That was the last time he was seen.
Yeah, well, it makes sense.
He had a paper that he had written on the Zohar under his arm. So he spent many of those last few years. I think it was he was in a room all by himself. He couldn't go out in Warsaw there until he was gathered up. It's a heartbreaking and heroic story.
Yeah. Well, as you said it well, heartbreaking and heroic, because, now he had a son, Aaron Zeitlin, who was a writer in Eretz Yisrael. Look him up, Aaron Zeitlin. Now, they say Hillel...
Yeah, and in America, Aaron Zeitlin also spent time at Dropsy College in Philadelphia.
Okay.
For many years. Right,
okay. Now, some of the works I think he wrote or translated. But I heard that sometimes, he added or took away, he made whatever. But by and large, Aaron wasn't like his father, But just an interesting, we come across these individuals in our history. That's Hillel Zeitlin till recently was totally forgotten, at least in the world, in the American world, in the academic world. Really, yes, Moshe.
I had just a question about another individual in a similar category.
Yes, you may, but please speak louder.
Can you hear me now?
Yeah.
Is that better?
Now it's better.
Okay. So there's a person, he's still Baruch Hashem in this world, Rabbi Yitzchak Ginsburg. So he is a interesting person, and I'm curious how you would sort of
Again, I would put Yitzchak Ginsburg into the same category of sorts. Absolutely, he's a genius, gifted, about teshuva, I believe, way back. I don't know what level, but about I'm saying where he was, and I always think of him. The story is that he was walking by a Hasidic shtibel or a shtibel in St. Louis. This is what I heard.
yes.
And
Hillel, our friend, he should be well, Hillel Rosenfeld.
yes,
Hillel Rosenfeld. He is from St. Louis, and I think he is their contemporaries. And I don't know if he knew him, but he shared with me the exact same story that you're about to share.
yes, and that is that he was walking by and he heard them singing Shalashuddis, some beautiful meditative nigunim, and it moved him where he kind of went in and then he started to rediscover Yiddishkeit, and the rest is history. His I'm not talking now politically, his political views, but the fact is that he has definitely stands out in that way. And, in the Chabad, Kfar Chabad, the original Kfar Chabad people, and there's a remnant of them in their kids and grandkids today, but the real McCoys that came from Russia, those were the founders of Kfar Chabad, right? They were Chabad Hasidim, and you can't pull the wool over them. They know the score. They're respectful, but when you're sitting at a Farbrengen they'll let you have it. You don't pull any nonsense over them. When Yitzchak Ginsburg, when they heard that he started with his how he taught Chassidus and how he Kabbalah, Chassidus and Kabbalah together. Then he's in Batayan, I think he whole moved, they were very suspect of him. Very suspect. And they did not accept him. But he proved himself. And they saw that he is genuine. That he's a real chassid and a real, and that's his style. It's not their style. So just like Steinsaltz had his, opponents, Ginsburg's had his opponents, and these individuals in every generation, every time, they are, and it's not just in Chabad, I'm sure there's in other communities, people like this, but, so what does this have to do with Shavuos? We do have to speak a little bit about Shavuos. It's a great conversation. I love it. But Shavuos is coming tomorrow night, and I'm thinking about it. I'm thinking about it. How is this Shavuos going to be different than last year and the year before? And I think it's Manishtana, exactly. Another Shavuos, another Pesach, but now it's Shavuos. So that's the first question we have to ask. Farbrengen, we said we're talking Farbrengen. Farbrengen means you have to ask yourself, how's it going to be different? How am I going to be different? What am I going to do about it? And if you prepare yourself, then it's, that itself, that you think about it, that itself is so valuable. Last night, someone davened Ma'ariv, and he said the bracha on Sfiras HaOmer, and the Sfira is so fast, and he's a friend and a very fine person, really. But I went over to him and I said, I don't want to say what I said online, but I said to him that's not the way, it's Sfiras HaOmer. You're supposed to know the weeks and the days and the Sfira. Take a moment, take a breath, and then say the bracha like a mensch. I'm not telling you to close your eyes and shake your hands and Buri Chatu Hashem. I'm not telling you to do that. Baruch Ato Hashem Elokeinu Melech Haolam, like a normal person. Like, I'm saying this is because when you prepare yourself, even thinking that you want to prepare yourself, that's already a preparation. In halachic terms, we have something called machshirei mitzvah. right? Let's take a mole, a ritual circumciser who does the bris. The actual mitzvah is the bris, right? What about the tools used to do the bris? They're called machshirei mitzvah, preparation for the mitzvah. And there's a whole shaila in the Gemara and Halacha on Shabbos. Are you allowed to? What do you do with those machshirei mitzvah? I'm just saying. We know that a moil does. Are you allowed to carry them for the mitzvah and things like that? Machshirei mitzvah. So machshirei mitzvah, in this sense, in our sense of the Farbrengen, is preparing ourselves. So what is Shavuos about? So the traditional is, I think the Vilna Gaon says it, and Chassidus says it. So this is another one where the Vilna Gaon and Chassidus are on the same page until the Rebbe goes with one nuance different. But the basic question is, how is it that we went to sleep on Hashem? We know that if we're getting a very big gift, something very special, that's really out of the ordinary and special, you can't sleep like you're thinking about it. Hashem says, I'm giving you the Torah. Har Sinai, I'm giving you the Torah. So you would think, what's the preparation for the Torah? To learn more Torah, to be more spiritual. And we were, in a sense. But at the last moment, we go to sleep on Hashem. As though Hashem's going to come to give us the Torah and he has to wake us up. Like, that's not considered by us, special. That means, okay, he has something for us. Wake me up when you're ready, So that's the question that everyone asks. What happened over here? And because of that, we are masakin, we corrected by being up all night tomorrow night. And I want to say, just for the record, for those that are listening, that for some people it's very hard to be up at night. They fall asleep, their eyes shut down, all that. So if that happens, try to get up early. Sleep and get up 5, 6, 7, and finish the tikkun, learn, what I'm saying? If you can. Anyway, so that's why we're up. But the question is still a question. So the basic answer is that the experience of feeling and understanding Hashem, God, in the conscious state, being up versus being asleep, the sleep state is greater. Why? There's no impediment. The mind, the seichel, logic comes along and questions, maybe this, maybe that, maybe yes, maybe no. So the Yidden said to themselves, Hashem is about to give us this holy Torah, and it's so special, and we've been approaching it with logic, rationale, seichel, intellect. Now we're going to experience it in a greater and higher way. We're going to go to sleep without the blockage of the mind, and let Hashem's Torah filter through us in the superconscious, to use those words. Again, I'm sure the Vilna Gaon didn't use the word superconscious, but that's the idea. In classical Talmudic terms, the cholam state, the state of a dream, has that purity that the conscious awake state doesn't have. And that's why we see Chazal on one hand dismiss dreams, on the other hand they say we don't dismiss dreams. It's a balance, but there's very powerful experiences coming through a dream. This Shabbos I reviewed a mimer in shul for the balabatim, for the people, from 1938 that the previous Rebbe didn't say, but he wrote, and he gave it to his secretary to publish so that Hasidim and Yidden could learn it on Shavuos. Was Yisach Shavuos, 1938. And when he gave it to the secretary, Rabbi Getzel Berger, who was called Chacher Fagan, Chacher for Yecheskel, he told him, if people would know where this mimer is from, they would learn it and look at it in a different way. So the Chacher says to the Rebbe, if that's the case, that they would be aroused in a way that would be greater in serving Hashem, Rebbe, tell us where you got this mimer from. So the Frierdiker Rebbe said to Chacher Fagan, who was already an adult and a secretary and a mashpia and a Chassidish Yid, there used to be a saying that a meveis alt wird men alt schnell. If you know everything, you become old very quickly. In other words, I ain't telling you. You know, here we are with the white beards, we're already older and all that. I mean, I think what really the Frierdiker Rebbe meant is like, I can't divulge this. This is 2 weeks later or so, Reb Mordechai Chayfetz, Reb Mottel Chayfetz, he was a shadar of the previous Rebbe. He was like a shliach to raise money here for his work in Russia. He came back, he had yechidus with the Frierdiker Rebbe, and in talking, the Rebbe told him about this mimer. Somehow Reb Chacher Fagan, who was a friend of his, heard that he was in yechidus. So he asked him, could you tell me what the Rebbe told you about the mimer? He said, it's private, I can't tell you. So what does a good old chassid do? What does he do when he hears that from another chassid? What do you think he does? He invites him for a malava malka. He pours 1 cup of vodka with some herring and kichlach. He pours a 2nd cup, and the Russians know how to drink, of course. And after 3-4 cups, you don't have to ask him about anything. You start speaking. And he tells him what the Rebbe told him in Yechidus about the mimer. And the previous Rebbe said to him, it was Motzei Shabbos, 27th of Iyar, Parshas B'chukoisai. I was sleeping at night, and my father, the Rashab, came to me in a dream. And my father said that this mimer that you said on Parshas B'chukoisai, which began with the words Tanya B'sof Perek Gimel Nida, the opening words of the Tanya from the Gemara Nida, it's a mimer of the Rebbe Marash. In other words, you repeated your grandfather's mimer and added, and I had questions on it. In other words, the Rashab is saying, I had some questions on what my father said in a mimer. And I couldn't understand. I couldn't get the answer to those questions. Then he said to him, today, when you said the mimer on Shabbos B'chukoisai 1938, the questions were resolved. The way I heard it from you, my questions were resolved. Take this mimer, add some lines in the beginning to make it relevant to Shavuos, add some lines at the end to make it relevant to Shavuos, and to publish it and distribute it so people should learn it in public on Shavuos as well. That's what he told him. So the mimer, the previous Rebbe said, if people would know where the mimer came from, it came from his father in the middle of the night in a dream. And by the way, the previous Rebbe writes that after the dream, he got up and he couldn't sleep. And he writes it was 1:30 in the morning. He sat down and he started to write down the mimer as the Rashab instructed him in the dream. So a dream, again, I know we're talking about Rebbes and Tzaddikim, but there is a specialty to the dream. So let's go back. So the Yidden wanted to experience Hashem from the dream perspective. So if that's the case, the question is, why do we stay up? What's their sin? What was their transgression, their mistake? So this is where the Rebbe adds this, not the Vilna Gaon. So the Rebbe in the Likutei Sichos in the first few volumes. So the Rebbe says that the mistake is that as much as the dream state is that special state, the bottom line is dira betachtonim, feet on the ground, like we learned in the Maimer Navata Tetzava. It's all nice and fine and dandy having, a dreamlike experience, like experience, but it has to be brought into the world on earth. And that's why, as holy as it is to go into that state of sleep, it's even holier to be on earth and live like a Yid. And that's why we're up. And that's the story of life, the story of Avodah. Who of us here doesn't want to daven and learn and then be in a base medrash all day, or for someone else to put tefillin now with Yidden all day, or to talk to people about Hashem and be makar of them and all that, right? We have to go to work. We have to bring parnasa, etc., etc. Says the Rebbe that going out to work and making a dira betachtoinim where you are is holier and greater than just sitting in Beis Medrash all day. It's very, very important, but not as important as dira betachtoinim. And I think this message that the Rebbe shared that is like an akuda yisodit, foundational point of Shavuos. Here we're getting the Torah, and it's so magnificent, so special, and so holy, and everything else. We must remember that you got to take the Torah and make the Torah part of the world. The world has to say, "I want Torah," not us in the base of Medrash in the shul. We know that we want Torah, or even in our homes. We have to ask ourselves the question: do the Yidden around us, all Yidden, regardless, do they feel and understand what Torah is? And if not, how can we communicate it to them that they should feel as that old Yiddish lullaby? Torah is the best schayra. Torah is the best merchandise. It rhymes. Torah is the best schayra. Torah is the best schayra. We used to put to sleep, some probably still do, little babies in their cribs with this tune. I forget, Yoni, do you remember the whole tune? I forget now the whole tune.
Yeah, Torah is the best of Chayra.
Right, but that comes as part of, it's a tune. I just don't remember now. Afim Pripitschuk brennt a fire, in du bist heiß, und der Eben julet mit den Kinderlach, kommt Aleph Beis, und der Eben julet mit den Kinderlach, kommt Aleph Beis. So there you don't have the words, Torah is the best schayra, but that's the song that we used to put children to sleep with. The Rebbe actually repeated this at a Farbrengen. And this is traditional Yiddishkeit.
My mother used to sing that song.
You see? Yeah, it's traditional. So Torah is the best schayra, and the world is ripe. People want to know, and we have to give it to them. So in other words, if they don't know, we're at fault. It's so easy to blame them. They're apikusim, and they're meaning, and they're shoyim. I wish you guys would understand Yiddish. I've made already so far 20 videos with my father. I'm getting from Yiddish speakers, they say they've never heard such a thing. Because he's a Romanian Yid, he speaks Yiddish like that, and he communicates in clear dictum, with details, these ideas. And what I'm telling you now, he said it yesterday. He said, when he was on the ship coming from France to America in 1958, he met a major Satmar supporter who at the time, gave millions to Satmar, both in America and in Eretz Yisrael, the Turakarta and the Badats and all that. My father's money that my grandfather gave him was stolen from him on the boat. And he didn't, I don't know how this is possible, but he didn't take food with him, or very little food. He was not thinking, he says, and so he's like, no food, no money, What does he do? So he sees this Hasidic Jew. His name was Getzel Berger. My father says it, so it's no secret. Everyone knows Getzel Berger. He was a Satmar Chassid who lived in, I think, London, very wealthy. And he says, maybe you have something for me to eat. So the Getzel Berger says, I have, I'm not going to give it to you. So my father says, why not? He says, well, do bis mekarev, because you bring close the apikursim, the rishoyim, because I saw the way you made a minyan. You went around and you gathered 10 people to make a minyan for mincha, ma'irav, or whatever, with people that are not religious. So my father said, so it's better that I shouldn't gather them together? And he says, yes. So my father tells over the story, and my father says how wrong he was. He gave him, at the end, he gave him some of his chicken and eggs, and then he gave him Coca-Cola, and then he even gave him $5 on the condition that he meet the Satmar Rebbe when he comes to America, which he did, Bashgocha Pratis. He took a job in the Satmar bakery, and the Satmar Rebbe walked in, so he was Makayim. He fulfilled the Tanai, the condition of Getzel Berger. He wasn't going to go see the Satmar Rebbe. He was a Lubavitcher Chassid, you know. But what I'm saying is, you know, Rishoyim, Minim, Yechilonim, that's not our concern. That's God's concern. Our concern is to bring Kedusha, Tara, or light. You know, it's the same relationships. We can argue, we can fight. You know, you want to live a life of fighting and arguing. You know, at a certain point, you get sick. People, I counsel people, like, enough is enough. You might be right, but you're ruining your life. The years are going. Stop with the fights. Just go on. You're right. Just go on. And I include that, you know, family politics and inheritance issues, and a son over a daughter, and it's unbelievable in all communities of all kinds. And then people take money and they don't return it, and they rip you off and all that. It's all right. But you have to ask yourself, do you want to get sick? Do you want to have more stress? Do you want to be happier? Do you want to serve Hashem? Go on. Let Hashem do. Believe me, Hashem knows the score. And Hashem takes care of what he needs to do. You don't have to be Hashem's, lawyer. You know, there were Yidden that although they could go to a bezdin, they were scared to go to a bezdin. Mom is scared. Going to a bezdin and then having to the person swear to take a shvuah? I told you that once, that story. My father and I, someone, took a lot of money, he loaned a lot of money, and he didn't repay, and we had to go to my father went to bezdin, and the guy said, with a Satmar Toyin advocate who knew halacha, Hilchas Ribbis very well, and he said, I'm ready to swear. And I was right in front of me. The Dayanim said, you're going to swear on Hashem's name? He said, yes. He says, you know what it says about swearing? He says, I know, and I don't care. I'm going to swear. So a real frum Yid, thinks twice about doing this. So I'm not talking about that, but I'm talking even just about the stress, the anxiety, the anger. You got to let go. You got to let go, and I'm telling you, if Hashem wants you to get back your money, if Hashem wants the relationship to be rebuilt, it will happen. Because people, not saying it's always this way, because there are people that go to the ground with the anger and everything else, but many times people wake up and they say, I was wrong, and let's ask for forgiveness and let's move on. Anyway, Chavit, this is a bit about Shavuos. So I wish you the bracha, the previous Rebbe, Kabbalah Satayra, Besimcha, Bepnimius. You should receive the Torah with inwardness and joy, mamish joy. It shouldn't be a burden. It should be, I like to learn, I want to learn, I'm a Kabbalah Torah, I want to do with the Torah. It's a gold mine. Our Torah is a gold mine Hashem has given us. So be Makabel Torah with that joy and that inwardness. Bring it in, share it with your family and your friends. And we should be Zeicher to the Geula Shlema, the Karav Mamish. Everyone should have a good gebench to Yom Tiv. Only Simchas and Mitzvah Hashem will start 1 minute we'll start Monday, the next mimer in the same sefer that we're using. It's Mayim Rabim. It's the Mayim Rabim Leyuchel Hachabas Eish. We'll start that. Yes, Yoni, you wanted to say something? Who?
The one thing, like you, a lot of times you'll say that it's not a Chabad thing, meaning like even though it's written in the Chabad Svarim, so it's not necessarily a Chabad thing. It's just like in a halacha or it's Torah. So I think one of the things that we're talking about going out and not being in the base medrash world, they're going out to other Yidden. This is specifically written in the Torah. Kol Yisrael Merevim Zelel, written every single time. The finger hurts, the hand hurts, the body hurts. Rashi says this. I mean, yes, the Svarim bring it out 100%, but it doesn't make sense. Like sometimes the Torah that we have, a lot of people, they just don't keep parts of the Torah. They just keep whatever they want to be insular and stay insular and be with themselves and not go out to the Klal Yisrael.
So Yoni, what you need to do is put your hand around their shoulder and give them a hug.
Yeah.
And I'm telling you, when you do that, if you get yourself to do that, they'll talk and you'll talk and they'll open up. Okay? Because a Jew wants to help another Yid. Sei gesund. Take care. Good Yom Tov. Take care. Good to see everybody. Bye-bye.